Hello everybody, Chef Vaughn and crew here at the Spott, New Smyrna Beach on Canal Street. Having some fun here this morning. If you zoom out, you'll see here we sourced a beautiful Hereford hog from Herta Birchwain Farm in Groveland, Florida. It's a small family-run operation. Very impressed with what I'm seeing so far. They raise two breeds of hogs. They raise Herefords and Berkshires. I chose a Hereford for our first hog here in our whole hog preparation and demonstration of butchery. This is probably my favorite thing to do in the whole industry. We get ultimate control and then limited availability because we have one hog. We're not purchasing a whole case of pork chops. We're purchasing one animal, which gets us 16 center cut pork chops. So everything here is very special. A little information on this breed of pig. This breed of pig was developed in the 20s and 30s in Iowa. It's a mixture of Duroc, Chester White, and Poland China, raised for two qualities. They're excellent mothers. They have large litters. They take care of their babies, and they have an intense marbling, right on line with the Berkshire, also known as Cura pork. Very tender, very juicy, very unlike the meat that you buy in your grocery stores. So we're really excited to show you and help you learn and see what we do on a daily basis here as a small family-run restaurant that provides the best we can for our local farmers. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to talk about what I'm doing as I'm doing it. And as I do everything, I'll show you and tell you about things that you can do with those pieces. So as you see the interior of the animal on one side. This animal provides us with many meals, many different preparations. First thing I'm going to do to show you is this right here. This is the leaf lard. This is just the fat that the animal stores on the inside of the carcass. And forgive me if I use some of those heavy butcher words, but this is a carcass, this is an animal. This leaf lard, you'll see it in a few places. What we can do with this is we can render it down and we can deep fry in it, we can saute in it, we can make pie crust with it. There's so many things we can do. Up until vegetable shortening was created, this was actually the shortening that everybody in probably our whole world, if not just our country, used. But once you remove that leaf lard, what you start to see is the rest of the interior of the animal. Like I said, I'll take that and I'll render that down nice and slow. There's a few cuts I'm going to make here on the interior of the animal before I start to quarter it. So the smartest thing to do from this standpoint is start here. Now this, if anybody's familiar with steak, this is the inside skirt steak of the pig. You can see I'm using pressure and I'm removing it so. Obviously not as large as the skirt steak on a cow, on a steer, but very tender, very delicious, full of fat, super yummy. And then here on the inside of the carcass, maybe one of the most famous cuts on the animal, we have the tenderloin. It's very easy to remove. On a steer, they call this the filet mignon. You can see it runs all up into the spine and then into the hip cavity. It's quite easy to remove. This is a muscle that does no work its entire life. It just hangs out in here, gets delicious. I'm going to come in here, do the final seam out, and from there, you can just peel the tenderloin right out. So there we have, before I peel it, the boneless pork tenderloin. Beautiful cut of meat, tender. You can cut it into cutlets and pound it thin. You can roast it whole, you can marinate it and grill it. Really, the sky's the limit with this. As you can see, very tender, very beautiful, very delicious. Next move for me always I like to remove the front quarter. So you can see all the ribs in here. I'm going to count to 5, and I'm going to cut between the 5th and 6th rib. So I have 1 here, 2 here, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to insert my knife all the way to the skin, make my first incision. All the way through, follow that up to the rib cage, and then as gracefully as I can, I'm going to flip this animal. Probably not so graceful, but and as you can see here, that incision is already started for me. I'm going to insert the knife, and I'm going to push all the way through the loin. Make sure that I'm getting all the way through, all the way to the cage. Snap the spine.
Yeah.
As you can see, I've exposed that loin. Beautiful loin chop. Doesn't look anything like the loin chop that you get at a grocery store. You can see, look at that beautiful fat cap. That beautiful, I mean, it's so tender. Like I said, these animals are known for their tenderness. And you can see that cross cut. Lying here, we have the Boston butt, we have the picnic ham, we have the trotter. This is probably the part I'm the most excited about. I'm going to do a old school French preparation where I peel the trotter back and stuff it. For now, I'm going to make a little space. Then we're going to return to the saddle and hindquarter section of the animal. Now you can see I have the whole belly section here connected to the loin. The next 8 ribs are your center cut pork chops. So basically here to here is what your traditional pork chop is from a market. Left on, with the belly left on, you have those fun little con pork chops that everybody's rocking right now. But I'm just going to continue to quarter this animal. So the cool thing about butchery is what you learn about anatomy. Anatomy you start to learn by looking at seams. So you can see here's the ham, the inside of the ham. You can see this crease, right? So in order to maximize belly, I'm going to make 1 incision here. You can see where those 2 muscles meet. I'm going to use pressure and just make small flicks of the knife to separate the belly from the leg. And now I have this mark here. I'm going to flip this back over, and I'm going to show you as things move, right? So I have my mark here, which we just went over. When you hold firm here and you lift here, you can see where the socket is, which is the seam of the leg. The sirloin will be right here, not something you typically see served off of pork. You might see some pork porterhouse steaks, which would include that tenderloin that we just cut off. But I'm going to draw a little line. I feel it right here. I feel the socket. So I'm going to make a notch right here. And I have my notch here. So just through the skin. Obviously a sharp knife is your friend. I'm going to meet those 2 cuts. Come down through. Come down through. Then I'm going to bury that knife right to the spine. And I'm going to follow through. So there's a lot of manipulation you have to do throughout this process so that you're looking at what you want to see. I'm just going to make sure that I'm right on that socket, which I am, and I'm happy about. I'm going to peel the muscle away to expose as much of it as I can so that when I come into the inside, it's an easy break. Now back to the inside. Something that the butchers don't share, and I'm going to share with you a little secret cut. This right here is the spider muscle. It's a tender muscle that lies inside the hip socket. It's going to tell you everything about how this animal tastes. You can flash sear it. You can grill it. Really, as you can see, it's small. But I need to remove it so that I can see my hip socket. And now you can, get a good idea. You see things moving. Here, most importantly, we're going to start to separate the ham. And if you notice the way I'm holding this blade, I'm holding this blade so it's sturdy. And if you want to get a quick peek in here, you can see that I've exposed the hip socket. Now I just have to cut a little bit of that cartilage, free it up for movement. Turn the animal so I can get the rest of that ham disconnected on the back side of the hip. Come around the top end of that hip socket, free up a little bit of that meat. No saw involved, no fancy tools. I mean, you could, but this is a small family-run operation, so no need to invest in tools that we don't need or have the space for. So now you can see everything that's been exposed. This is easy knife work. I'm trying to maximize the yield on my ham. We're going to do something fun with that. Not quite sure yet. It's kind of the beauty of this. Gives me the ability to see the animal, work my way through it, think as I go. And there's just a little bit of connective tissue I have to break down in here. And this is kind of the part that creeps some people out, but it's what lets you know you did your job. Removing the bones, getting to that hip socket, and removing the leg. There we are. Now we're looking at that rear leg. We have the sirloin here. We have your ham muscles here. There's a lot you can do with this as well. Some of these muscles, albeit are from some of the hardest working part of the animal, if butchered correctly, can be peeled and seamed out and cut across the grain, grilled as steaks, cured, roasted, braised. There's really a lot you can do with it. So super exciting stuff. Next, what we're going to do, we're going to separate the spare rib section from the belly. So your prime belly is about 8 inches wide, runs almost the entire length between the front quarter and the rear quarter. What you'll notice is that these rib bones kind of run a back angle towards the rear of the animal. Where those rib bones connect to the spare rib section is actually very easy to draw a knife through. Now I'm just trying to get through that meat so I can remove the spare ribs. And you'll notice that separation of muscles. That comes right off. Those are your bone and spare ribs. And what that's exposed to me are my rib bones for my center cuts. We talked about the 8s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then these last 2 are floating ribs. They did not connect to those spare ribs. I'm going to make an incision following the rib bones up to expose the belly. Once you get in there, you literally just put pressure. I'm putting upwards pressure to the bones. And when I serve this pork chop, I'm going to leave about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to make a notch here. I'm going to flip it over. I see my notch in my guideline. I know that this loin on the center cuts runs to about here. So I'm gonna do a little trace from here to here where the spare ribs end. And then I'll go back to my belly cut to get the belly off of the ribs. I just want to get to the ribs and through. I'm going to stand this right up, and you'll see I'm letting gravity do all the work. Yet again, pressing to those. Once I get to this last floating rib, I'm just going to make a little incision so that it opens up for me. Remember that line we were talking about? I just found it. Now, what this animal will also show you via this anatomy lesson that I guess we're having now, just on top of butchery, is you can trace that all the way back up that rib. You see where it ended up? Right inside of this vertebrae socket. I'm going to make a notch on this side, drawing a straight line. I'm going to go back over, leaving that belly exposed for you to see. And I'm going to draw a line from that same rib to that notch I just made. I'm going to sink that knife and press all the way through that loin. One nice foul swoop. And then the same thing that we just did on the other end. Break it off. So now I have the ability to take this piece of meat and cut bone-in pork chops. I can peel this off and do a bone-out pork chop. Something special I'm going to do with this pig, especially for those of you who are all coming to dine with us over the next week or so as we get through processing. I'm going to take all the skin. I'm going to boil it. I'm going to let it cool for a night. Then I'm going to strip the fat off. Then we're going to cut it into little pieces and dehydrate it. And then you guys can all come have a nice snack, crispy pork skin. Deep fried, some call them chicharrones. I call them pork rinds. Some of my favorite things in the world. Now you can see we have this prime belly section here. I'm going to continue this line down so that I can harvest my sirloin. This will be the back section of the boneless loin and the sirloin. Really nice piece of meat right here. I have my boneless belly slab. Really the prime real estate is from here to here. This we're going to make sausage and we're going to make some stew. We're going to do all sorts of fun stuff. You can see that belly roll. You see that sirloin roast. You can see that rib roast. Now I'm going to take a second. I'm going to remove these from the table because that's future work for me. I think most importantly, it's something I'd like to tell you all is that we're going to utilize every bit of this animal that we can. It's respectful. From an economical standpoint, we purchased this animal, so why not pay it as much respect as we can and use every bit we can. So there's very little waste, maybe less than 2% on the entire purchase will be waste. Heidi at Herta Berkshire Wade Farms was also nice enough to provide us with the caul fat, which is a thin layer of fat that surrounds the organs, which is great for making hand-formed sausages. The heart, the liver, the head, which you see over here, and additionally 2 gallons of blood, so we can make some fresh blood sausages, either in a traditional European style or maybe morcilla in a Spanish style. No really determined plan for that yet. However, yet again, this animal, was slaughtered for us, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that purchase goes as far as it can. Now, this section of the animal, front quarter, your traditional barbecue Boston butt, the loin that lies inside of this here. The Italians cure that for capicola. There's really a lot you can do here. You can even cut this shoulder loin into steaks. Those more affordable pork chops you see in the market are actually shoulder chops. Maybe my preference, but not everybody's. It's a little more tooth to it, but we have a lot of options here. I'm going to do the flash breakdown of this. We all recall, if you were watching, those same spare rib section that just came off the belly. Now on this section of the animal, it continues. So where that rib meets, you can see I just cut between the 2 ribs. It takes almost no effort if you know where you are on the animal. There is a little bit of a chest plate here that I have to work a little bit harder to get through. Not too hard. And anatomy, right? It shows you everything that you need to see. Try to move slow, be precise with your cuts. Now in here, this is some of the neck meat down into the brisket. You can see some of the odd bits, like the lymph node here. This is the sweetbread. This is another one. We might do something with that, we might not. It all depends on where we are with processing. But it shows you have options. I'm going to remove this. Come through with a reverse stroke here. As you see, there's meat there, so we have the ability to make sausage. I'm going to come in on these ribs and remove them. That's the continuation of the spare ribs up through the front of the animal. Some trim for sausage. All of the bones, every single bone that we harvest out of this animal will be roasted and made into pork stock. Now for maybe the most important part of this to me, because I love all the odd bits, trotter. So you look at this, you have the hog's foot attached to a shank, which can be cut into ossobuco if you like, but we don't have a bandsaw, so we're not going to get crazy like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this trotter for you guys, and then later on in the week, I'm going to peel the skin back, remove this section of the femur, remove all the meat from that, and then we'll have this skin all intact. I'm going to make a really delicious sausage. Might add some truffle to it, might add some foie gras, who knows. But then we're going to restuff it, tie it off, poach it, let it chill, and then, I don't know, maybe I'll bread it and fry it. I don't know yet. Like I said, these things kind of happen organically. But we're going to serve 4 whole stuffed trotters off of this animal. So, as we started with this whole conversation, it's one animal. I'm not buying cases. I only get limited amounts. So, back to anatomy, right? We can see this socket here moving. So, we're going to make a line. This animal has a large tendon on the back. And if you think about a pig, every time you see a pig, what do you see a pig doing? Eating. Hence the reason they call somebody who eats a lot of pig. So we're going to get through all the meat on the top side. I cut through that tendon on an upwards angle into what's called the picnic roast. So there's the femur here. There's another bone that goes from here to here that meets the scapula that runs into that shoulder. finish my cut that I started on the bottom side, and then I'm going to peel this back into its knuckle. You have to kind of manipulate things as you go to make sure you're getting through all the tendons. You can see I've already exposed that knuckle. This is a very, very hard working part of this animal. So everything that I'm working through right now takes a little bit of effort to get through. But anybody who likes to cook and knows about slow food knows that all the hard working bits with a little bit of time and effort are the best tasting bits. So you break that knuckle. There's one tendon that runs through the middle of it. It's very sturdy. And then you get your trotter. You can see all that delicious meat in there. Hard-working meat, too tough to eat as it stands, but with either some grinding or some braising, incredibly delicious. So on that section of the animal, I'm going to put that away because that's a lot of work for me. I'm going to take this trotter, pack that away. Then I'm going to come back to the rear section of the animal. And we all remember where the loin meets the ham, meets the other trotter. And we just removed the trotter from the front of the animal. This has got a totally different build out front to back. What you'll notice is that the socket runs, you see that crease? The socket runs much higher. And I can feel right there is where it's bending, where it's flexing. So I'm gonna mark that. I'm gonna come in here. But as stated earlier, I want to maximize all the skin so I can feed you all yummy pork rinds. And if you have any ideas on seasonings, or I like mine with salt and pepper, but it allows you to really taste the animal. But I am interested to see how you would like them seasoned. Please don't say blackened, because that's a little overdone in my opinion in the area. I'm going to continue through. From this socket all the way to the back is just one big muscle. So I can come right down through that muscle. This is the bottom of the ham, but we're not a sandwich place. We're not really concerned with having a big, robust ham. I'd rather feed you all sorts of fun, yummy bits. You'll see I've just fallen into that socket on this side. I'm going to continue to work down the other side of this, get through the skin, get through those tendons. And as stated earlier, don't need a saw, don't need a knife that's too big. Anything between a 5 and 7 inch sturdy boning knife is all you need. If you're trying to do this at home or just trying to learn, it's all you need. So we're going to snap that, get through that center tendon just like on the other side, flex the leg, and you have a rear trotter right there. Now this is like, if you come in and you want one of these trotters that we're talking about, I'm going to have the 2 front trotters. I'm going to have the 2 rear trotters. You can see the rear's a little bigger. There may be 2 different price points available. I'm not sure how we're going to make that all happen yet, but you can look at all that meat. Absolutely delicious. You see the color of the red meat because this is a heritage pig. It's not white meat. Those commercials from the 90s, those were pigs that were raised in pens in giant barns that never got to run around and play like happy pigs. Something that was so appealing to me about this farm. She used the word play a lot, Heidi, when I was speaking with her. I was very impressed. It reminded me of my time growing up in New England and that sensibility of wanting to care for an animal and let it live as naturally as possible within the realm of your farm life. We're moving on to do one last little move here before we take a little break to get the next half of the animal out. I'm actually going to show you a different style of breakdown on the other half. Yet again, we have the ability to do so. I'm just using pressure. I'm actually going to Make myself a little handle in that skin. And you just continue to follow the lines. It shows you naturally. You can see the difference in the fat from here to here. If anybody's ever been around a farm or been around these animals, you can see that maybe when the flies are pestering them, they shiver. That's the skin on these animals can move separately from the muscles. Helps them with pests. Another thing that I would like to note is that this is a very hard business adventure in the South for a pig farmer. We see an overabundance of wild pigs in nature. What you don't get to hear is that the mortality rate on a farm here, due to the temperate conditions here, being that we're in a tropical environment, it's very difficult. So we have to really try to do our best to respect every bit of this to make sure that we're doing it justice. And it's a very difficult life living on a farm to begin with. But when you talk about doing something that's usually done in cooler climates, because the pigs are not dealing with the heat and they're less reactive. Here's the skin from the ham. As you can see, I don't have a trash can. Nothing's going in the trash. This section of the skin is prime real estate for pork rinds, minus this, minus this. I am gonna, because we're coming up on the holiday season, for anybody who's used to traditional Italian food, I'm gonna make a sausage called cotechino. Cotechino is a traditional Italian Christmas sausage that has ground meat, boiled skin, some chopped meat in it. It's in a larger casing. It's absolutely delicious. It's got those kind of fun seasonal spices in it that remind you of the holidays. Now we're looking at the boneless ham section of the animal. And I spoke earlier, it was hard to tell of the sirloin section in difference to the ham section. We have this hip socket here. You can see where I've made my other incisions. I'm going to come in right here. I'm going to come in right here. And then on the flip side, I'm going to connect the dots. Remove that. Now it's important to feel your way around, make sure that you're getting everything you can. Now we have the boneless sirloin section, and that's got some sausage trim on it. It's got the end of the loin. And these are all the leg muscles, really the prime real estate. Big, large ham muscles. We really have anything that we want to. When we talked about waste, this animal does have a couple of glands. There's a gland here I'm going to remove. This is the only piece you've seen me throw away so far. I'm going to move this over to the side. Move this over to the side. And we're going to be back in a few minutes with the next half. Thank you for watching. All right, everybody, we're back. Round two, side two, Heritage Hereford Hog from Herta Berkshire Wayne Farm. We're going to start this with the same couple moves that we started the other half with, by cleaning out the inside of the animal, harvesting the leaf lard, which, as stated before, we're going to render down, do some fun stuff. If we do make any pastry doughs with this, we'll let you know that it's old school. It's made with meat, just in case you're a vegetarian. So here's all that leaf lard, which I'm going to set aside. Which I must note, remarkably, doesn't really taste like pork once all cooked down. It's just rendered fat, much more healthy for you than rendered vegetable fats. Lower in monosaturated fats, easier for your body to digest, lower in cholesterol, believe it or not, even though it's from a pig. I'm also going to come in and I'm going to harvest out this tenderloin again. Same process. Follow the bones, keep it simple, use pressure. You'll notice I'm feeling my way around I'm relying on the bones to show me where I'm going. I wish you could smell this, because there's nothing like a farm-raised animal. Doesn't have any aroma but sweet. It's fed good food. It's happy. It gets to run around and play like an animal should. And then last of all, it's going to do its job for all of us, and we're going to enjoy it. So there's that pork tenderloin, removed just like before. Very tender piece of meat. Grill it whole, cut it into cutlets, pound it, cut it into little medallions, also known as tournedos. There's so much we can do with this. All of this trim coming off of this will also be going into our sausage grind. Greg and Terry were nice enough to order me some equipment to further process this animal. We have a sausage press coming. We already have a grinder in-house because we grind all of our meat trims. However, we needed a couple things to further the processing on this, especially to make sausages. So we're going to make our own sausages. Look forward to that. I'm not sure what kind of flavors I'm going to do yet, but I tend to be a little playful when I do that. So we're going to do a different breakdown than we did on the last half to show you the versatility of this animal. So I'm going to start by getting to the end of these ribs. And I'm going to cut this spare rib section right out. You can see I'm cutting between two bones right now. And it just flies right through with a proper placement. I'm going to peel this back so I can yield as much belly as I can. Because on this end, I'm going to show you all how to harvest a porchetta. For those of you who don't know what a porchetta is an Italian specialty, slow roasted belly wrapped around the loin. So the belly fat renders the loin throughout the cooking process. Loin stays nice and juicy. That one little notch here always gives me a little bit of trouble. Sometimes you just have to get a little aggressive. There's the entire spare rib section connected. Before we had the belly section and the foresection separate, but that's all together. These are super yummy treats. You can cut between the rib sections. You can leave them whole and barbecue them and smoke them. You can braise them. You can confit them in duck fat or its own rendered pork fat. Really, the sky's the limit. It's got some tendons that you have to deal with. But for those of you who like chicken wings, this is infinitely better than a chicken wing. So now we have the half of the animal. And you can see I've exposed this under of the belly section. Now I'm going to come through and I'm going to remove my trotters like I did on the fore end. You're going to get a totally different vantage point on it. So I'm going to move this closer to me so you can see the flex. You see this crease right here? Natural crease that it makes. That shows me everything I need to know. So on that crease, I'm going to make a little incision. And since I'm cutting it from the inside, I have the ability to use pressure. The entire time. Peel that meat away from the bone. And I'm cutting a little higher on the femur bone so that I have extra meat and extra skin for the stuffed trotter dish that we're going to run. And I just keep peeling and I get to the exposed socket. And for those of you who want to know what they're eating, they want to know their food, it's pretty easy for us to show you and make a promise that this comes from a good place, raised by good people with good intentions. We want you to be healthy. We want you to enjoy high quality foods here. Anybody who's dined with us knows we buy the best things we can get our hands on. We treat them simply. And the end result is what we hope is always great. So, continue down that notch to that socket. The same on both sides. And then I'm going to go back over and I'm going to do a little snap. Now, like I said, it's all about yield. It's all about being respectful. If you want to take a little quick peek, I just exposed that socket. I'm going to come around where the two bones meet. Little notches. There's some tendons in here I have to sever prior to going for my snap. Get it off the end of the table so I have a little leverage. Open the socket up. You know, I could very well just grab a bone saw, cut right through. Like I said earlier, it's not a necessary tool. So there's that front trotter. As you can see, I've exposed this femur bone here, which will make it actually a little easier for me on the back end when I get to doing my other work. And as I stated earlier as well, I am the most excited about these stuffed trotters. It's a lot of labor. It's a lot of work. A lot of time in cooking. You know, we got, after post butchery, we're probably looking at about 7-8 hours of preparation and cooking time per. So it's not like we're not working hard for you. I'm going to come back to the back of the animal now and do the same thing. Now when we're talking about seams, if you look here, I'm going to put a little pressure. You can see where the ham muscle and the leg separate. I'm going to come in on an angle facing upwards. I'm going to start to release that. I'm going to get through that Achilles tendon. And then what that did was that met right up with my socket, which I'm thankful of. Expose that socket. I'm going to flip the animal over and connect the dots. Forgive me for saying connect the dots, but I really liked that game when I was a kid. Come down through, manipulate these muscles. You can see I've already exposed everything I need to. So it's the same game as we played last time. Mark through the tendons, connective tissue, meat. I'm going to go back over so I can use my leverage again. This one I have to say, because I started on the inside of the animal, I did a little bit better job yielding meat and skin for the stuffed trotter dish. You can see. Now I'm going to seam out from the inside of the animal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to peel the skin. Bring a knife through. At this point, I want to show you the different muscle groups. You know, long, smooth strokes with a knife with pressure. Do the same on the top side. Something you'll run into, especially once you run against bones. You'll start to turn over the edge on your blade. Use your honing steel, come back, wipe off any blade residue. That'll allow me to make nice sharp cuts again. I'm in towards the ham. You can see the great fat on this animal. Milky white, super healthy. The tail is going to be in the way at some point, so I'm just going to remove that. It's the same thing. It's, you know, it's an extension of the spine. So you find a vertebrae, remove that. That will be roasted for the stock. It's got good collagen in it. Same thing as before. We have this blade steak in here, the spider steak. I'm going to come in. I'm going to remove that from the hip socket. Comes out nice and easy. Butcher's cut, super delicious. Now I've exposed the inside of the hip socket. I've exposed the belly all the way to the rib bones. Then I have the front quarter. What I'm going to do is the same procedure I did on the front. Count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The reason I count to 5 is because I clear the scapula, also known as the shoulder blade. If I went between the 4th and 5th ribs, I would have a tip of the scapula poking into my belly meat. I yield 1 less pork chop by doing this, but I'm okay with that. Pork chops are cool, can't knock them, but they're, in my opinion, not the best part of the animal. The hardworking muscles, leg muscles, and belly, it's really the premier section of this animal. So I have now this section that I'm going to disconnect, just like I did in the first half of this video. Cut all the way down. I'm going to come in here and start to separate the belly. You see that separation, belly to leg. And with a little bit of pressure, it shows you everything you need to see. And I'm right down to that skin that I started to remove. I'm going to make a notch through the skin from the inside as a guide. Then I'm going to flip this animal over and finish those cuts. Down to the loin, through the rib, through all the meat I can. So I have nice clean pork chops. Now on this side, here's that notch I just cut. I'm going to manipulate this a little bit. You see that where that hip socket is? I'm going to draw a line through the skin, but then I'm going to take a hard turn. I'm going to go vertical so that I can show you where the sirloin and the hams meet. I'm feeling in there so I can get to the spine without cutting out too much of the ham. Like I said before, this is a different approach. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start to separate these into primals, lift, and since I did all my knife work already, it's doing everything that I need it to. This side's a little different. I have a little floating piece of the, I'll show you on this side. The hip socket connects to the spine and there's not another vertebrae until we get to this line right here. So I'm just going to notch that out. Break a little bit of that connective tissue. And as you can see, I worked the meat, I worked the knife. This is where that line finished for the sirloin. So I'm going to come in, notch to right there. Connect those two. On the inside here, where I've already exposed from removing the tenderloin, I've already exposed some of that good bone structure. I'm going to come to the end of that H-bone, it's called. And I'm going to expose the socket, which I just exposed right there. Slide a knife in, break the cartilage, follow the H-bone down so I can meet up with this first vertebrae, which continues in to here. I'm going to turn the animal back over. As you can see, there's a lot of manipulation. I'm going to be a little sore this afternoon from all this. You know, who needs the gym, right? When you got a butchery program. Continue down the H-bone. You take a peek on this side. I've just exposed the continuation of the spine to the H. What this bone is called the H bone. I'm going to snap it right out of there so that I can easily work. That's a bone for roasting. This spider steak was right inside of that bone previously. I'm going to come in here, continue following this bone till I get to the hip socket where I just open it up on the other side. This is probably the most complicated procedure I could put myself through because I could have, just like on the other side, followed it down. I just wanted to show you something a little different. So we have an exposed hip socket. I'm going to cut down the bone that follows the thigh in. Continue exposing that socket. Hip socket is at this point already removed. I'm following the curvature of the bones down around the hip. You know, a very hardy animal. Works hard its whole life, so there are cuts that are a little bit more difficult to make, but well worth it. There we go. Rear leg removed. Whole saddle. Now the whole saddle, you can see here, I've just exposed the sirloin roast. The sirloin roast continues into the belly and up to the loin. It's a really cool cut of meat. You can see from an anatomy standpoint, it's right here. Just as good as a pork chop, maybe a little bit more chew to it. I'm going to find a vertebrae that I want to come down through. Cut through that loin. Do the same thing I did on the other side. Give it a little snap. Maybe a little spin. And off. There's your bone-in sirloin roast. I don't know if I've ever seen one of those available for sale. If you're lucky enough to know a pig farmer, or maybe even have a good butcher that you like to frequent that could hook you up with something like that, you can see that exposed loin to here. Now for the porchetta, I want to have as much loin as I can and as much belly as I can. Now you'll see the different muscle structures here. This is those spare ribs that we were talking about earlier. I'm going to make a little incision here and remove it in two pieces, so I can show you exactly what you're going to be looking at. Now you can see where that belly ends and the spare rib section begins. Excuse me. So I'm going to make an incision through the meat, through the skin. And I'm going to follow that line all the way up through here. This is good for braising. This is good for sausage, good for all sorts of things. Same procedure I started with on the other side to get these ribs removed. On the other side, perhaps I'll do some rib on pork chops. Perhaps I'll bone them out. I'm a big fan of French cookery. I like sauces, I like stocks. As you can see, if you take a peek from this side, every incision I'm making is just loosening up the ribs, which I'm just putting light pressure on from the inside. Then I'm going to get to the loin. And when I get to the loin, I want to follow the rib all the way up so that I maximize yield on my loin. When I get to the floating ribs, which end here, I'll make another incision and do the same. Which I missed one. No biggie. Come up right through there. Expose it. And, you know, the thing about this is a really strong animal, right? Still, with the proper knife placement and understanding of anatomy, easy to take bones out. You know, all the ribs meet the spine. You can see if you take a peek here, there's a line where all the ribs meet the spine. I'll show you how easy those are to remove. Make a move through all the cartilage. Make sure I'm through all of it. And then I'm going to stand this up. Let that belly weight hang down. I'm angling my knife a little bit more extreme because the ribs are ending and I'm getting into my loin. I'm going to follow this all the way to the spine. You can see, as I get to the spine, it just separates. What I end up with is, if you go to the store, the most expensive piece of meat on the whole animal, boneless loin. And again, I'll just remove these. Easy peasy, part of nature. Strip ribs. This is my center cut loin right here. I'm going to come in here and start to remove the spine. There's a little extension of the spine as it gets towards the hips. It's got a natural line where it shows you where to go with the knife. To peel those up and out. And a little notch that comes down on this side. So I'm going to come under that notch, which is similar to a floating rib, but not quite. I'm going to get underneath that bone. Please don't cut towards yourselves. I've been doing this a long time, so I trust myself, but hate to see you hurt yourself. I'm going to peel this spine right off. Yet again, more stock, more stock. We're going to trim this porchetta now. You know, you have a lot of non-attractive meats, but most importantly, what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to have a nice cylindrical piece. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to cut this off. Sausage trim, pork rinds, all that fun stuff. I'm going to look at this and think about my attack. So I know this line goes this way, so I want to come to try to meet that so I can make a nice rectangle. So I'm going to come in and take this off. And then all I have to do now, this is work down the road for me, everybody. Come in and square this off, trim it up. I'll score this side in the belly in an X fashion. I'll get some seasoning in there. I'll score the skin in an X fashion, just barely through the skin, just the skin itself, because what I want this to do is I want to slow roast it, and then I want to remove it from the oven, turn the temperature up, and I want to hot roast it so the skin puffs up, gets super crispy. This will be one of those things we're going to advertise a few days out so that we ensure that we sell this all in one service. There's not really much we can do with it afterwards except for maybe making sandwiches or turning it into soup, and I would hate to have something with this much effort go into a program like soup. So what we've just all gone over: sirloin, trotter, trim, completely different. Trim for sausage, bones. You know, we've gone over the fact that we're not going to waste any of this several times. If you like sausage, we're going to have a lot of fun with sausage. I have my whole belly attached to the loin porchetta roast. And we're going to jump back into the front end of the animal, into the picnic, into the Boston butt. And we're going to separate it in a different fashion than we did the first time around. This, just like the saddle of the animal, You can take these bones right out just by following them up. Once I start to get into the end of the rib bones on this side, I'm going to get right into the neck. This all comes out in one swoop. You can see where the neck bones end on this side. I'm just going to make a little incision so that when it gets there, it just flops right off. Yet again, we'll go a little vertical with it. There's all your neck bones. For those of you with Italian grandmas, aka nonas, those pork neck bones that they love for their Sunday gravy, right there. Beautiful stuff, lots of collagen, adds a lot of flavor. There's some trim on here that I'll take off for sausage, and then those bones will be roasted for stock. Now you're looking at the front quarter of the animal without the rib cage. So yet again, see anatomy. We can see where that's popping right there. This is where you can disconnect the picnic from the butt. I'm just going to trace that line. And we talked earlier about the capicola, aka front loin of the animal. Your traditional pulled pork comes from your Boston butt, which is right here. They just remove the scapula from this side. Continue down through, exposing the socket through the skin. Notch it on this side so I can connect those lines. Now, where I expose that scapula on this side, which you can hear, I'm going to follow the end of it down to the knuckle, which is that piece that I showed you was just moving. You can see there it is. Not a overly complicated procedure. Now you have your picnic roast, aka your picnic ham, and your whole Boston butt. Moving back to the ham where we kind of started this whole little adventure. I'm going to continue to skin this down. Make myself a handle like I did before. Let gravity do all the work for me. Separate the two layers of fat with long, smooth knife strokes. I'm a fan of pulling towards myself because it allows me to see what I need to see. Now, when you're really on the skin, when you're making pork rinds, wanting to leave a little bit of fat on there, because that parboil, it's about a 1 hour parboil, started with cold water. You want the fat connected to it so that it keeps that skin pliable and able to work with. There we have a section of skin coming off of the ham, USDA certified. Another important note to note about Herta Berkshire Wayne Farm is that Herta Berkshire Wayne Farm is unlike any other farm that I've ever had the pleasure of working with in my career. They have their own processing facility on site. So control of the process from the start to the finish is all done on site. They rear the animals, raise the animals, slaughter the animals, process the animals, all on site. There's no putting an animal on a truck, driving it 100 miles, and then that animal getting a little freaked out because it's in a new place. That can change the flavor of the meat because the animal will be under stress and it'll be pumping all these endorphins through its muscles. They are able to control that for us, which we deeply appreciate because you can see by the quality of this meat, even the leg muscles are very tender to the touch. So that's the final breakdown there. We have the skin from the ham, the bone-in picnic, the bone-in Boston butt, the bone-in whole ham, and this head here. So yet again, buy the whole animal, use the whole animal. This head is going to be made into a dish called brawn. Brawn is also known as head cheese. The French call it fromage de tête. It's got beautiful meat on it. It's got these two large jowls. The Italians cure that for guanciale. It's like pancetta made from the cheeks. It's absolutely delicious. But there isn't a bit on this as far as meat and skin goes that's not edible when you treat it right. We're going to brine this for 24 hours. Then we're going to let it air dry for 24 hours. Then we're going to simmer it with aromatics for about a whole day, real gentle. Then we're going to pull all the meat off the bone, reduce some of that braising liquid, bring them back together, and form them and chill them. And we'll have house-made pate, also known as head cheese. That's what I have for you for today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's really a pleasure, so much fun. And we'll kind of continue to make some videos as we get into some plate-ready preparations. And hopefully you get to join us again and you get to see it, and then come on into the Spott here on Canal Street in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and enjoy this beautiful Hereford pig. Thank you.